The morning sun fought its way through thick clouds as Keisha Jackson rushed toward Central Station, her breath coming in quick puffs of white in the chilly air. She checked her watch for the 5th time in as many minutes. She was going to be late for her shift at Memorial Hospital, and Dr. Patterson was not someone who took kindly to tardiness. Come on, she muttered under her breath as she joined the flow of morning commuters pushing through the station's main entrance. The familiar smell of coffee from the corner shop mixed with the less pleasant odors of too many bodies packed into one space. Around her, a sea of faces stared at phone screens, each person wrapped in their own private world. Keisha hadn't planned to be running late, but when her coworker Denise had called in sick, leaving the night shift short-handed, Keisha had stayed an extra 3 hours. That was the thing about being a nurse. The job rarely respected the boundaries of a time card. 3 years into her career, she had grown used to the unpredictability, but that didn't make mornings like this any easier. She squeezed past a group of teenagers, their laughter cutting through the station's constant hum. Her bag caught on someone's briefcase, nearly pulling her off balance. "Sorry," she called over her shoulder, not slowing down. Her train would be leaving from Platform 7 in less than 5 minutes. If she missed it, the next one wouldn't come for another half hour. The station was particularly crowded today. A quick announcement over the speakers explained why. There were delays on the Eastern Line due to signal problems. Great. More frustrated people crammed onto fewer trains. Keisha pushed forward, weaving between bodies with practiced ease. She had almost reached the escalator leading down to her platform when something made her slow her steps. At first, she wasn't sure what had caught her attention in the chaos of the station. Then she saw him, an elderly man standing near a pillar, one hand gripping a white cane, the other reaching out uncertainly into space. Keisha hesitated. The digital clock above the departures board told her she had exactly 4 minutes until her train left. 4 minutes to get down the escalator and across to Platform 7. If she stopped now, she would definitely miss it. The old man tapped his cane against the floor, turning his head slightly as if trying to orient himself by sound. A businessman brushed past him, causing him to stumble slightly. Nobody stopped. Everyone was too caught up in their own morning rush. Keisha sighed and changed direction. Her mother had raised her better than to walk past someone clearly in need, no matter how pressed for time she might be. "Excuse me, sir," she said, approaching carefully so as not to startle him.
"Do you need some help?"
The man turned toward her voice. He was tall and thin, with deep brown skin that had weathered into fine wrinkles around his eyes and mouth. Those eyes, though clouded with cataracts, had a sharpness to them that suggested a keen mind behind them. He was well dressed in a worn but clean coat, a woolen scarf wrapped neatly around his neck. "Ah, yes," he said, his voice carrying a hint of relief. "Thank you for stopping. I'm afraid I've gotten a bit turned around. This isn't my usual station. Where are you trying to go?" Keisha asked, glancing quickly at the clock. 3 minutes now. "I need to catch the 8:15 train to Westfield," he replied. "But these renovations have changed everything. I used to know this station like the back of my hand. But now," he trailed off with a small, self-deprecating smile. Keisha knew the train he meant. It departed from Platform 12. All the way on the other side of the station. "That's quite a walk from here," she said. "Would you like me to show you the way?" The man's face brightened. "If it's not too much trouble. I wouldn't want to make you late for anything." Too late for that, Keisha thought, but she smiled and said, "No trouble at all. My name's Keisha, by the way." "Thomas," the man replied, extending his hand in her general direction. His grip was firm when she took it. "Pleased to meet you, Keisha." There was something dignified about the way he held himself, something that spoke of a life lived with purpose. Keisha gently touched his elbow, the proper way to guide someone who was blind, as she'd learned during her nursing training. "We'll need to go past the main concourse and down another set of escalators," she explained as they began walking. "It's a bit of a maze in here these days." "Tell me about it," Thomas chuckled. "I've been blind for only 2 years now, still getting used to navigating the world this way." Keisha guided him carefully through the crowd, occasionally announcing obstacles or turns. "Step down here, or we're turning right now." "If you don't mind me asking," she said as they waited for a path to clear through a particularly dense knot of people, "do you make this journey often?" Thomas nodded. "Every Tuesday. I volunteer at a community center in Westfield. Reading to children, if you can believe it. He smiled at what must have been her puzzled expression, though of course he couldn't see it. Audiobooks, he explained. The kids don't seem to mind that I can't see the pages anymore. They passed a bakery and the warm smell of fresh bread wafted over them. Thomas inhaled deeply. One advantage of losing your sight. Your other senses become much sharper. That sourdough smells divine. Keisha found herself smiling despite her lateness. There was something refreshing about Thomas's lack of self-pity. We're coming up to an escalator now, she warned as they approached. She helped him position his cane properly as they stepped onto the moving stairs. Around them, the morning rush continued unabated, people pushing past with muttered apologies or no acknowledgement at all. You sound young, Thomas commented as they descended. Student? Nurse, Keisha replied. On my way to my shift, actually. Ah, a noble profession. My late wife was a nurse. Toughest job in the world, she always said. They reached the bottom of the escalator and continued through another wide corridor. The announcements echoed off the tiled walls, creating a confusing jumble of sound. Keisha noticed Thomas tilting his head slightly, trying to make sense of the garbled words. They're announcing more delays, she translated for him, but your train is still scheduled on time from what I can hear. Thank you, he said. Not just for the update, but for stopping. Most people wouldn't, you know. Keisha felt a twinge of guilt remembering how close she had come to being one of those people hurrying past. I almost didn't, she admitted. I'm already running late. Thomas shook his head. Then I'm even more grateful. Your patients are lucky to have someone who would put a stranger's needs before her own punctuality. They had reached the ticket barriers now. Do you have a ticket already? Keisha asked. Thomas patted his pockets, a brief look of concern crossing his face. I usually buy them at the machine, but with the renovations, the machines have moved. Keisha finished for him. They're over to the left now. I can help you get one. She led him to the row of ticket machines and helped him purchase his ticket, guiding his fingers to the right buttons when needed. The process took longer than it should have, as the touchscreen was not designed with visually impaired users in mind. Highway robbery, Thomas commented when the final price came up. These fares go up every year, but the service never improves. Keisha laughed. You sound like my grandfather. He says exactly the same thing. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man, Thomas replied with a grin. Tickets secured. They made their way through the barriers and onto platform 12. The train was already there, its doors open as passengers boarded. The platform was less crowded than the main concourse, but still busy with Tuesday morning travelers. Here we are, Keisha said, leading Thomas toward the nearest door. Do you have a preference for where to sit? Not by the doors, if possible, he replied. Too much commotion with people getting on and off. She helped him find a seat about halfway down the carriage, making sure he was settled comfortably. The train should be leaving in about 5 minutes, she told him, checking the information board visible through the window. Thank you, Keisha, Thomas said, his cloudy eyes turned in her general direction. You've been extraordinarily kind. It was no problem, really, she replied, and found that she meant it. Despite now being definitely late for her shift, she felt a surprising contentment. Will you be okay from here? Thomas nodded. I've been making this journey for 30 years. Once I'm on the right train, the rest is routine. Westfield is the 5th stop. Keisha hesitated, not wanting to leave him if he needed further help, but he seemed confident now. All right then. It was nice to meet you, Thomas. Likewise, young lady. Perhaps our paths will cross again someday. With a final goodbye, Keisha left the train and hurried back through the station. She was now almost 20 minutes late, and Dr. Patterson would have plenty to say about it. But as she rushed toward her own platform, she found she couldn't regret her decision to help. What she didn't know, as she finally boarded her own delayed train, was that this brief encounter would change the course of her life in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. And as Thomas sat quietly on his train, his fingers running thoughtfully over the edge of his ticket, he was already making plans that would bring their paths together again much sooner than either of them expected. Keisha burst through the hospital's side entrance, her breath coming in quick gasps. The all clock in the staff corridor read 8:47 a.m. Almost 50 minutes late. She hurried toward the locker room, hoping to change into her scrubs before anyone noticed her absence on the floor. No such luck. Dr. Patterson stood at the nurse's station, his thin face tightening when he spotted her. Nurse Jackson, he called, voice clipped and formal. Nice of you to join us. Keisha took a deep breath. I'm sorry I'm late, Dr. Patterson. There was an emergency? A family crisis? He raised his eyebrows. Or just the usual train delays we all deal with by leaving home earlier. She thought about explaining about Thomas, about the blind man who needed help, but something held her back. It would sound like an excuse, and besides, helping someone shouldn't need justification. No excuse, Dr. Patterson. It won't happen again. He nodded curtly. See that it doesn't. Mrs. Hernandez in room 412 has been waiting for her pain medication, and the charts for the new admissions need to be processed. Keisha nodded and hurried to change. As she pulled her scrubs over her head, her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate Zoe. How was the double shift? Surviving? Keisha smiled despite her exhaustion. Zoe always checked in on her after long shifts. They'd been friends since nursing school, sharing an apartment to split the ridiculous city rent. She quickly texted back, barely. Tell you later. Patterson on Warpath. The morning passed in a blur of medication rounds, checking vitals and helping a new patient settle in. Hospital work had a rhythm to it, demanding but predictable in its unpredictability. Every day brought new challenges, but the essence remained the same. People needing care and Keisha doing her best to provide it. During her quick lunch break, she found herself thinking about Thomas. She wondered if he'd reached his destination safely, if the children had enjoyed their reading session. There had been something about him that stuck with her, a dignity, a warmth that seemed rare these days. Earth to Keisha, said a voice, breaking into her thoughts. Alicia, another nurse from her floor, slid into the seat across from her in the cafeteria. Where'd you go? You've been stirring that yogurt for 5 minutes without taking a bite. Keisha laughed. Just thinking about something that happened this morning. Must be something good. You've got this little smile going. I helped an old man at the train station. Blind guy needed to catch a train. Alicia nodded, taking a bite of her sandwich. That's why you were late? Patterson was on a tear. Yeah, couldn't just walk past, you know? Classic Keisha, Alicia said, but her tone was warm. Always picking up strays. Remember that cat you rescued from the hospital parking lot last winter? Chairman Meow is living his best life now, thank you very much, Keisha protested. The one-eyed tabby had become her roommate's pride and joy. Well, your kindness karma is due for a payday, Alicia said, wiping crumbs from her scrubs. Speaking of which, any word on that scholarship application? Keisha's smile faded. Not yet. Competition's fierce this year. The Wellington Medical Scholarship was her dream, full tuition to medical school plus a living stipend. With her student loans from nursing school and her mother's medical bills, it was her only realistic path to becoming a doctor. She'd applied 3 years running now, each rejection harder than the last. You'll get it this time, Alicia said confidently. Who deserves it more than you? Before Keisha could respond, both their pagers beeped simultaneously. Code Blue, room 415, Alicia read. Gotta run. The rest of the shift passed in organized chaos. The code had been successful. Mr. Patel would live to complain about the hospital food another day, but it had thrown the entire floor's schedule off. By the time Keisha clocked out at 7 p.m., she was dead on her feet. Outside, darkness had already fallen, the early autumn bringing shorter days. The air had a bite to it that hadn't been there that morning. Keisha pulled her jacket tighter around herself as she headed toward the train station. Central Station was different at night. The frantic energy of the morning commute was replaced by a more subdued bustle. She found herself glancing around as she walked through the main concourse, half expecting to see Thomas again. But of course he wasn't there. On the train home, squeezed between a teenager with blaring headphones and a woman deeply engrossed in her e-reader, Keisha let her mind wander. She thought about her mother, about the monthly bills piling up on their kitchen counter, about the scholarship application sitting in some committee member's inbox. Sometimes it felt like she was running in place, working so hard just to stay exactly where she was. The train rattled over a rough section of track, jolting her from her thoughts. The woman next to her looked up from her device. Sorry, the woman said, though she hadn't done anything. These old trains are getting worse. Keisha nodded politely, not in the mood for small talk. But the woman continued anyway. I was just reading about Wellington Medical Center. They're expanding again, did you know? New pediatric wing. Keisha's attention sharpened. Wellington? That's where I work. Really? You're a doctor there? Nurse, Keisha corrected. For now, at least. For now. Keisha rarely discussed her dreams with strangers, but something about the quiet train car and her bone-deep exhaustion loosened her tongue. I'm hoping to go to medical school. Been saving up, applying for scholarships. That's wonderful, the woman said, her face brightening with what seemed like genuine interest. We need more dedicated doctors, especially ones who've been nurses first. They understand the whole picture. That's the plan. If I can figure out how to pay for it. The woman nodded sympathetically. It's criminal how expensive medical education is. My brother's a doctor. Took him 15 years to pay off his loans. The train slowed as it approached the next station. The woman gathered her things. This is me. Good luck with everything. I hope you get your chance. Thanks, Keisha said, surprised by how much she meant it. Sometimes a little encouragement from a stranger could lift your spirits in unexpected ways. As the train continued its journey, Keisha found herself thinking again about Thomas. Had he made it home safely? Was he alone, or did he have family waiting for him? It was strange how briefly their paths had crossed, yet she kept circling back to their encounter. By the time she reached her stop, the train had emptied considerably. She walked the 3 blocks to her apartment building, muscles aching from the long day. The elevator was broken again, so she trudged up 4 flights of stairs, cursing under her breath at the landlord who never fixed anything promptly. Zoe was sprawled on their worn couch when Keisha entered, Chairman Meow purring loudly on her lap. The TV murmured in the background. Some reality show Zoe was addicted to. You look like death warmed over, Zoe said by way of greeting. Feel like it too, Keisha replied, dropping her bag and collapsing into the armchair. Chairman Meow immediately abandoned Zoe to leap onto Keisha's lap, kneading her thighs with his paws. Traitor, Zoe muttered to the cat. There's leftover pasta in the fridge and wine. Definitely wine. You're an angel, Keisha said, scratching the cat behind his ears. But I might be too tired to chew. Bad day? Long day. Started with me being late because I helped this blind man at the station. Zoe's eyebrows rose. Seriously? That's why Patterson was in such a mood? Apparently the world stops turning if I'm not there exactly on time, Keisha said, rolling her eyes. But I couldn't just walk past. This old guy was completely lost, needed to catch his train. Your mom would be proud, Zoe said softly. Keisha felt a lump in her throat. Her mother had raised her to believe that kindness mattered above all else, even when life was hard. Especially when life was hard. Yeah, she would. So what happened with the old man? Did you get him sorted? Keisha nodded, recounting her morning adventure. As she spoke, she realized how much detail she remembered. Thomas's dignified bearing, his self-deprecating humor about his blindness, the warmth of his thanks. He volunteers reading to kids, she finished. How cool is that? Even with his sight gone, he's still giving back. Some people just have that drive, Zoe said. Like you, Ms. I work double shifts and still volunteer at the clinic. That is different. I need the experience for my applications. Right. Nothing to do with you being a good person, Zoe teased. She turned serious. Speaking of applications, anything from Wellington? Keisha shook her head. They said decisions would be out by the end of the month. Not getting my hopes up, though. Well, I am, Zoe declared. In fact, I'm making a prediction. By this time next year, you'll be drowning in medical textbooks and calling yourself almost doctor. Keisha laughed, from your lips to God's ears. But as she finally dragged herself to bed that night, Keisha couldn't help the whisper of hope that fluttered in her chest. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe something would finally change. What she couldn't know was that across town, in a penthouse apartment overlooking the city lights, Thomas was sitting at a desk, his fingers moving confidently over the raised dots of a Braille document. Beside him, a phone sat on speaker mode. Yes, I've made my decision, he was saying, his voice firm. I'd like to proceed immediately. First thing tomorrow. The woman on the other end sounded surprised. So soon? I thought you wanted to interview more candidates. Sometimes, Claire, Thomas replied. You ain't know when you found the right person. As he ended the call, Thomas smiled to himself, thinking of the young woman with the kind voice who had helped him that morning. Tomorrow would bring quite a surprise for Nurse Keisha Jackson. Keisha woke before her alarm the next morning, unusual for someone who typically hit snooze 3 times before dragging herself out of bed. She lay still for a moment, listening to the familiar sounds of the city coming to life outside her window. Car horns, the rumble of early delivery trucks, Someone's music playing too loud for 5:30 a.m. She had dreamed about Thomas. Nothing dramatic, just a simple dream of them sitting together on the train, talking. In the dream, he had been telling her something important, something she needed to hear, but upon waking, the words had vanished like morning mist. Strange how a brief encounter with a stranger could stick with her like this. Perhaps it was because he had reminded her of her grandfather, the same quiet dignity, the same gentle humor. Or perhaps it was just that moments of genuine human connection felt increasingly rare these days. Keisha slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Zoe in the room across the hall. She had an early shift today, but for once she didn't mind. The earlier she started, the earlier she could leave and head over to her mother's place for their weekly dinner. The hospital was quieter in the early morning hours. Keisha moved efficiently through her rounds, checking on patients who were mostly still asleep, updating charts, preparing medications. She liked this time of day, before the hustle of doctor's rounds and family visits began. "You're cheerful this morning," remarked Gloria, one of the night shift nurses who was preparing to go home. "Got a hot date after work?" Keisha laughed. "Just dinner with my mom." "Ah, family, even better," Gloria said, stifling a yawn. "How's she doing?" "Good days and bad days," Keisha replied. Her mother's rheumatoid arthritis had been getting worse over the past year. "But she's tough. Like mother, like daughter," Gloria said, patting her shoulder as she passed. The day unfolded smoothly. Dr. Patterson was in surgery, which always improved everyone's mood on the floor. Keisha helped a new patient walk the hallway for the first time after hip surgery, held an elderly woman's hand during a painful procedure, and explained discharge instructions to a worried husband who kept forgetting details. This was why she had become a nurse, these small human moments. But lately it wasn't feeling like enough. She wanted to do more, to understand more, to be the one making the diagnoses and prescribing the treatments. Her mind kept circling back to the scholarship application, checking her email during breaks, though she knew it was too soon for a response. At 4 o'clock, Keisha clocked out and headed to her mother's apartment in the Ridgewood neighborhood. It was a modest 2-bedroom in a building that had seen better days, but her mother kept it spotlessly clean and filled with plants. The smell of cooking greeted her as she let herself in with her key. "That you, baby?" her mother called from the kitchen. "Unless you're expecting another daughter I don't know about," Keisha called back, smiling as she dropped her bag and jacket. Louise Jackson appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. At 58, she moved more slowly than she once had, her hands slightly swollen at the joints, but her face remained unlined, her eyes bright with intelligence and humor. "Smart mouth," she said fondly. "Come taste this and tell me if it needs more pepper." Keisha followed her mother back to the kitchen, where pots bubbled on the stove, her mother's famous gumbo, a recipe passed down from her Louisiana grandmother. The spicy aroma made Keisha's stomach growl. "Perfect," she said after tasting a spoonful. "Though you know I always think your cooking is perfect." "Flattery will get you everywhere," her mother replied. "Now sit and tell me about your week while this simmers." They settled at the small kitchen table, the familiar ritual comforting after the long workdays. Keisha told her about the patients, about Dr. Patterson's latest unreasonable demands, about Zoe's new obsession with some reality TV dating show. "And yesterday I was late because I helped this blind man at the train station," she added, surprising herself by bringing it up. He needed to catch a specific train, and the station renovations had confused him. Her mother's eyes softened. "You always were one to stop and help, even as a little girl bringing home injured birds and stray cats." "This was an old man, Mom, not a stray cat." "The principle's the same," Louise said, stirring the gumbo. "Kindness never goes unnoticed by the universe." Keisha rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "Now you sound like Grandma with all that universe talk." "Your grandma was a wise woman. I'd do well to sound more like her." Louise set down her spoon and looked at her daughter more seriously. "What's got you thinking about this man anyway? You help people every day at that hospital." Keisha considered the question. "I don't know exactly. There was just something about him. Like he saw right through me even though he couldn't actually see me. He volunteers reading to kids even though he's blind. Said the kids don't mind that he can't see the pages anymore. Some people refuse to be limited by their circumstances," her mother said quietly. And Keisha knew she wasn't just talking about Thomas. They ate dinner together, the conversation moving to other topics. Louise's church group, The rising cost of groceries, a cousin's new baby. But Thomas lingered in the back of Keisha's mind, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit anywhere but couldn't be discarded. Across town, in a spacious penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, Thomas Wellington moved with practiced ease through rooms he had memorized before losing his sight. Though he employed a housekeeper who came 3 times a week, he preferred to spend his evenings alone. 2 years of blindness had taught him new ways to navigate his world, and he took pride in his independence. His phone rang, a special ringtone that told him who was calling before the voice assistant could announce it. "Claire," he said warmly after pressing the button on his specialized phone. "Right on time, as always. Would you expect anything else?" Claire responded, her crisp voice filling the room through the speakerphone. "I have the information you requested on Keisha Jackson." Thomas settled into his favorite armchair. "Go ahead. 26 years old. Graduated from City College with a nursing degree 3 years ago. Currently works at Wellington Medical Center, ironically enough on the general medicine floor. Excellent performance reviews. Applied for the Wellington Medical Scholarship 3 years running but hasn't received it." "Financial situation?" Thomas asked. "Supporting herself and helping her mother, who has rheumatoid arthritis. Student loans from nursing school. Not in dire straits, but definitely stretched thin." Thomas nodded to himself. This confirmed what he had sensed about the young woman who had helped him. Hardworking, compassionate, with aspirations beyond her current position. "What about family connections? Any relation to anyone on the board?" "None whatsoever," Claire replied. "She's been selected for the initial review round each year based purely on merit, but never makes it to the finalist stage. Those spots tend to go to candidates with connections." Thomas frowned. He had established the scholarship 20 years ago, with the explicit intention of helping talented students without connections or advantages. Somewhere along the way, the selection process had drifted from his original vision. "The board meeting is tomorrow at 2, Claire continued. "Are you still planning to attend?" "Absolutely," Thomas said firmly. "It's time I took a more active role again. The board members will be surprised. You haven't attended in person since your surgery. Then it's high time I surprised them." Thomas's voice held a note of determination that Claire recognized from their 30 years working together. After ending the call, Thomas moved to his desk, fingers finding the braille reader connected to his computer. He had been the head of neurosurgery at Wellington Medical Center for over 20 years, before retiring 5 years ago. Even after retirement, he had remained chairman of the hospital's charitable foundation. His blindness, the result of complications from a stroke 2 years prior, had caused him to step back from active participation, but he had never relinquished his authority. The universe worked in mysterious ways sometimes. If he hadn't decided to test the accessibility of the public transportation system himself, if he hadn't gotten disoriented at that particular station, if Keisha Jackson hadn't been the one to stop and help him. But she had, and now he had the opportunity to right a wrong. He thought about her voice, the gentle way she had guided him, how she had taken the time despite clearly being in a hurry herself. She hadn't known who he was. To her, he was just an elderly blind man needing assistance. That revealed more about her character than any resume or application ever could. Thomas reached for his phone again and dialed another number from memory. "Dr. Harrington? Thomas Wellington here. I'd like you to add a candidate to tomorrow's scholarship interview schedule." "Yes, I know it's last minute." "Her name is Keisha Jackson. She's a nurse at our hospital." He paused, listening. "I'm aware of the protocols, Michael, but I believe the founder of the scholarship still has some say in the matter, doesn't he?" He smiled at the flustered response. "Excellent. And one more thing. I'd like her interview scheduled for 2:15 just after I address the board." Another pause. "Yes, that's correct. I'll be attending in person tomorrow." As he hung up, Thomas felt a sense of anticipation he hadn't experienced in years. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. Keisha was halfway through her morning rounds when her pager buzzed. A message from hospital administration requesting her presence at a meeting at 2:15 that afternoon. No further details provided. She frowned at the small screen. She wasn't scheduled for any meetings today, and administration rarely called nurses for individual meetings unless there was a problem. "Everything okay?" Alicia asked, noticing her expression. "Not sure. Got called to admin this afternoon." Keisha showed her the message. Alicia's eyebrows rose. "Huh. Maybe it's about that incident report from last week. When the patient's son was yelling at you? I filed all the paperwork on that, Keisha said. Besides, Dr. Chen backed me up completely. Well, it's probably nothing bad, Alicia said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. Maybe they're giving you an award for not strangling Patterson yet. Keisha laughed, but a knot of worry had formed in her stomach. The hospital had announced budget cuts last month. People whispered about potential layoffs. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not with her mother's medical bills and her own student loans. The rest of the morning dragged by, each task taking longer than usual as her mind kept circling back to the mysterious meeting. By lunchtime, she'd convinced herself of the worst. She picked at her salad in the cafeteria, appetite gone. You're being ridiculous, she told herself firmly. If they were firing you, your supervisor would be involved, not just admin. At 2:05, Keisha headed to the administrative wing of the hospital, an area she rarely visited. Everything was different here. Quieter, with plush carpeting instead of practical linoleum, framed artwork on the walls instead of health posters, and the faint smell of coffee rather than antiseptic. The receptionist, a polished woman in her 40s, smiled professionally. Keisha Jackson? They're expecting you in the boardroom. Down the hall, last door on the left, the boardroom? That couldn't be right. Board meetings were for department heads and hospital executives, not floor nurses. Are you sure? Keisha asked. The message just said to come to administration. Quite sure, the receptionist replied. They're waiting for you. With growing confusion, Keisha walked down the carpeted hallway. The boardroom door was slightly ajar, voices murmuring inside. She took a deep breath, knocked lightly, and pushed the door open. The long table was surrounded by men and women in expensive suits, hospital executives and board members she recognized but had never spoken to. At the head of the table sat Dr. Michael Harrington, the hospital's chief of medicine, and beside him, Keisha froze in the doorway. Thomas. The blind man from the train station, except he wasn't dressed in the worn coat he'd worn that day. Today he wore an impeccably tailored suit, his white cane resting against the table beside him. Everyone in the room seemed to be deferring to him, their body language respectful, almost reverent. Dr. Harrington stood. Ms. Jackson, thank you for joining us. Please come in. Keisha stepped forward automatically, her mind racing. What was happening? Why was Thomas here? Had she done something wrong in helping him? Thomas turned toward the sound of her entrance, a smile spreading across his face. Ms. Jackson, he said warmly. It's good to hear you again. You know each other? Dr. Harrington asked, surprise evident in his voice. Indeed we do, Thomas replied, though Ms. Jackson doesn't fully know me yet, I think. He gestured to an empty chair near him. Please sit down. I promise this isn't anything to worry about. Keisha sat, acutely aware of every eye in the room on her. Her uniform felt suddenly shabby compared to the suits surrounding her. Let me properly introduce myself, Thomas said, turning toward her voice. I'm Dr. Thomas Wellington. I was chief of neurosurgery here for 20 years before retiring 5 years ago. I still serve as chairman of the Wellington Medical Foundation. Wellington. The name hit Keisha like a physical force. Wellington Medical Center. The Wellington Scholarship. This man wasn't just some random elderly patient, he was the Wellington, the hospital's most significant benefactor. I don't understand, she managed to say. Thomas smiled gently. 2 days ago you helped a blind man find his way at Central Station. You had no idea who he was. You were late for work, but you stopped anyway. You didn't just point me in the right direction. You took the time to guide me personally, make sure I was safely on the train. Keisha nodded before remembering he couldn't see her. Yes, but what you didn't know, Thomas continued, was that I was conducting something of an experiment. After losing my sight 2 years ago, I've become increasingly concerned about accessibility in our city. I decided to test the public transportation system myself, anonymously. What I discovered was that while the physical infrastructure has significant gaps, the larger problem is human indifference. He leaned forward slightly. Do you know how many people walked past me before you stopped? 47. I counted. 47 people in the space of 15 minutes. A murmur went around the table. Keisha didn't know what to say. But that's not why you're here, Thomas said. You're here because after our encounter I became curious about the young woman who had shown such kindness. I made some inquiries and discovered something interesting. He reached for a folder on the table, his fingers finding it with practiced ease. This is your Wellington Scholarship application. Your third, I believe. Keisha's heart began to race. Yes, it's an excellent application. Your academic credentials are outstanding, your recommendations glowing, and yet somehow you've never made it to the finalist stage. Dr. Harrington shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Several board members suddenly seemed very interested in their notepads. This morning, Thomas continued, I reviewed the selection protocols for the scholarship program I established 20 years ago. I was disappointed to discover how far they've drifted from my original intent. His unseeing gaze seemed to sweep the table, and Keisha noticed several people looking distinctly uncomfortable. The Wellington Scholarship was created specifically to help talented individuals without connections or advantages pursue medical education. Yet somehow over the years it has increasingly gone to candidates with family connections to this hospital or to board members. The silence in the room was deafening. Keisha hardly dared breathe. Today I've exercised my authority as founder to make some changes to the selection process, Thomas said. Those changes have been distributed to you all in the documents before you. But first I want to address the case of Ms. Jackson directly. He turned toward her again, his clouded eyes somehow finding her face. Ms. Jackson, the board has some questions for you. This is effectively your scholarship interview. I hope you don't mind the unusual circumstances. Keisha's mind was spinning. An interview now. She wasn't prepared. She was in her wrinkled scrubs after half a shift. Her hair was hastily pulled back. She hadn't reviewed her application materials or practiced her responses. But as Dr. Harrington began asking her questions about her background, her interest in medicine, her experiences as a nurse, something strange happened. The answers came easily, naturally. These weren't theoretical situations she was discussing. They were her lived experiences. The patients she'd cared for, the doctors she'd learned from, the gaps she'd observed in the healthcare system. Thomas listened intently, occasionally nodding. Other board members asked questions, some pointed, others genuinely curious. Keisha forgot her surroundings, forgot her appearance, forgot everything but the passion that had driven her for years. Final question, Ms. Jackson, Dr. Harrington said after about 20 minutes. Why medicine? Why not continue as a nurse, a profession where you clearly excel? Keisha considered her answer carefully. I love nursing, she said honestly. It's taught me more about healthcare and humanity than I could have learned any other way. But I've reached the limits of what I can do for my patients in this role. I want to understand the why, not just the what. I want to be part of the diagnostic process, the treatment decisions. I want to bring the perspective of someone who's worked on the front lines of patient care to the practice of medicine. She paused, then added, and I want kids from my neighborhood to see someone like them wearing a white coat. To know it's possible, Thomas smiled, a wide, genuine smile. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. If the board has no further question... He waited a moment, but no one spoke. Then I believe we can conclude this interview. Ms. Jackson, would you mind waiting outside for a few minutes while we deliberate? Deliberate? Keisha stood, legs slightly wobbly. Of course. Thank you for the opportunity. She left the room in a daze, closing the door behind her. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, heart pounding. What had just happened? The blind man she'd helped, the kind old gentleman heading to read to children, was actually Dr. Thomas Wellington. The Wellington? And he'd arranged a scholarship in interview for her on the spot? It seemed impossible, like something from a movie, not real life. Yet the voices murmuring behind the closed door were real. The polished wood beneath her fingers was real. After what seemed like hours but was probably only 10 minutes, the door opened, and Dr. Harrington called her back in. Every face turned toward her as she entered. Thomas was smiling. Ms. Jackson, he said, the board has reached a decision regarding your application. Time seemed to stop as Keisha stood before the board, waiting for Dr. Wellington to speak. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of the hospital beyond these walls. Ms. Jackson, Thomas began, his voice warm, the board has unanimously approved your application for the Wellington Medical Scholarship. Full tuition and expenses for all 4 years of medical school, plus a living stipend. The words didn't register at first. Keisha stood frozen, certain she had misheard. What? She managed finally. Several board members smiled. Dr. Harrington nodded encouragingly. You've been awarded the scholarship, Thomas repeated, effective immediately. The foundation will also provide a transition stipend so you can reduce your nursing hours when classes begin. Keisha's legs felt suddenly weak. She gripped the back of the nearest chair. I don't understand. Just like that? Not just like that, Thomas corrected gently. Based on your excellent academic record, your outstanding work as a nurse, and the character you demonstrated when you helped a stranger without expectation of recognition or reward. Tears welled in Keisha's eyes. She had imagined this moment so many times, receiving the scholarship notification, celebrating with her mother and Zoe, but never like this, never so unexpectedly. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what else to say. Sometimes thank you is enough, Thomas said, smiling. Now there are details to discuss, paperwork to complete, logistics to arrange. Claire, my assistant, will help you with all of that. He gestured to a composed woman sitting near him who nodded at Keisha. But those are matters for another day. Thomas continued. For now, I believe you have patients waiting for you, Nurse Jackson. Or should I start calling you Dr. Jackson a little early? A laugh bubbled up through Keisha's tears. Nurse Jackson is fine for now, Dr. Wellington. Good. We'll need you back here tomorrow morning to complete the formal acceptance. 9 o'clock? I'll be here, Keisha promised. As she left the boardroom walking on air, she heard the meeting resume behind her. The board was already moving on to other business, but for Keisha, nothing would ever be the same again. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. She went through the motions, administering medications, checking vitals, updating charts, while her mind raced. Several times she had to stop and remind herself that it had really happened, that she wasn't dreaming. By the time she clocked out, the news had started to spread. Alicia caught her in the locker room, eyes wide. Is it true? She demanded. Did you seriously get the Wellington scholarship in the middle of your shift? Keisha nodded, still barely believing it herself. How did you hear already? Are you kidding? The whole hospital is talking about it. The blind guy you helped was the Dr. Wellington? And he called a board meeting for you? Girl, this is like something out of a movie. It did feel like a movie, Keisha thought. The kind of thing that happened to other people, not to her. I still can't believe it, she admitted. Yesterday I was helping this sweet old man catch his train, and today you're the talk of the hospital, Alicia finished for her. She pulled Keisha into a tight hug. I'm so happy for you. You deserve this so much. Keisha hugged her back, tears threatening again. I need to tell my mom. Go, Alicia urged, shooing her toward the door. Call me later with all the details. Instead of heading home, Keisha took the bus straight to her mother's apartment. Some news couldn't wait, couldn't be delivered over the phone. Louise opened the door, surprised to see her daughter on a day they hadn't planned to meet. One look at Keisha's face and she knew something significant had happened. What is it? What's wrong? She asked, ushering Keisha inside. Nothing's wrong, Mom, Keisha said, the words spilling out as soon as the door closed behind them. You remember that blind man I told you about, the one I helped at the station? Louise nodded, looking confused. It was Dr. Wellington, the Dr. Wellington from the hospital, the one the Wellington Scholarship is named after. Her mother's eyes widened. The rich doctor? The philanthropist? Yes. And he recognized my voice when I walked into this board meeting they called me to. He had them interview me right then and there, and Mom... Keisha paused, her voice breaking. I got it. I got the scholarship. Full ride plus expenses. I'm going to medical school. For a moment, Louise just stared at her, processing the information. Then she let out a joyful cry and threw her arms around her daughter, arthritis forgotten in the moment of celebration. I knew it, she said fiercely, tears streaming down her face. I always knew you'd find a way, my brilliant, kind-hearted girl. They stood holding each other in the middle of Louise's small living room, both crying and laughing at the same time. Years of struggle, of saving every penny, of Keisha working double shifts and still barely making ends meet. All of it had led to this moment. What did I tell you? Louise said finally, pulling back to look at her daughter's face. Kindness never goes unnoticed by the universe. Keisha laughed through her tears. I'll never doubt Grandma's wisdom again. Later that evening, after calling Zoe and sharing the news with her equally excited roommate, Keisha sat alone in her bedroom, trying to process everything that had happened. On her lap was a folder Claire had given her before she left the hospital, containing information about the scholarship, about medical school enrollment, about the next steps in her journey. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Ms. Jackson, this is Thomas Wellington. Claire helped me with this text. I wanted to thank you again, not just for your help at the station, but for reminding an old surgeon what's truly important in medicine. Compassion. Never lose that quality. No matter how much you learn or how skilled you become, it's what will make you an exceptional doctor." Keisha read the message 3 times, her heart full. She carefully typed a reply. "Thank you for believing in me, Dr. Wellington. I promise I won't let you down." The response came quickly. "I have no doubt of that. By the way, I still plan to read to those children in Westfield every Tuesday. Perhaps you'd care to join me sometime? The children would benefit from meeting a future doctor." Keisha smiled. "I'd be honored," she replied. 1 week later, Keisha found herself sitting beside Thomas in a brightly decorated community center in Westfield. A circle of children sat cross-legged on the floor in front of them, faces upturned in anticipation. "Today we have a special guest," Thomas told the children. "This is Ms. Keisha. She's a nurse now, but soon she'll be a doctor." "Do you help people get better like Dr. Tom?" a small girl with braids asked. Keisha smiled. "I do, and I hope to help even more people when I'm a doctor." "Are you Dr. Tom's friend?" asked another child. Keisha looked at Thomas, who was smiling in her direction. Were they friends now? It seemed too simple a word for what had happened between them, for how their lives had become unexpectedly intertwined. "Yes," she said finally. "We're friends. We met at a train station." Thomas nodded, satisfied with her answer. "Sometimes the most important people in our lives are those we meet by chance," he told the children. "Now who's ready for today's story?" As he began to read from his braille book, his fingers moving confidently over the raised dots, Keisha watched the children's faces light up with imagination. In just a few months, she would be starting medical school, beginning the journey she had dreamed of for so long. But she would make time for this, for sitting beside her unlikely friend, for reading to children, for remembering that medicine was about people first and foremost. On the train ride back to the city, Thomas asked about her preparations for medical school. Keisha told him about her plans, about the apartment closer to campus she was hoping to find, about her mother's pride, Thomas said thoughtfully. "In all my years of philanthropy, all the buildings named after me, all the research I've funded, nothing has given me as much satisfaction as this. Seeing the right person get the opportunity they deserve, because of a random encounter at a train station." Keisha marveled. Thomas shook his head. "I don't believe it was random at all. You stopped to help when 47 others walked by. That reveals character, Ms. Jackson. And character is what builds a truly great physician." As the train rumbled through the darkening evening, Keisha realized that while her life had changed dramatically in the past week, the most important parts remained the same. Her compassion, her determination, her willingness to stop and help when others hurried past. Those qualities had opened an unexpected door, and she was ready to step through it.